Hi friend, today I'm going to be breaking down the two different boiling methods that you can use to cook all kinds of whole grains like rice, quinoa, barley, rye, millet. I'll show you both the straining and the exact water boiling methods. I'm going to give you the pros and cons of each, explain both of them, and suggest which one is best in different situations. And then I'll give you a demo of each, just cooking some simple brown rice in my kitchen. In this video, I want to show you these boiling methods so that you can simplify your cooking. You're going to get faster and more efficient when you're preparing your whole grains, and you're going to make your time in the kitchen less stressful and more productive. So let's dive right in. Welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Ryan Williams, your host and the founder of Growing Pure, where I help you make vegan cooking and health fast, simple, and mind-blowingly tasty. Okay, so today we're going to talk about these two different boiling methods. Now, this might seem overly simplistic, it might seem really basic to you, but I think if you really think through these two different strategies, you can see which one is best for different situations, because quite often people tend to do some kind of hybrid of both of them, and that kind of gets the worst of both worlds. Either do one or do the other, and you will be more efficient in the kitchen. So this primarily applies to cooking whole grains. Now, whole grains, like I said, rice is a major one, but there are so many others, and they are a real powerhouse of a whole food vegan diet. There's loads of fiber in there and loads of starch, so it's going to give you that slow release energy throughout the day. It's not going to spike your blood sugar. You're going to get a nice, even release of energy. Aside from that, whole grains have so many good nutrients in them, loads of vitamins and minerals. They really are. They should be a major part of your plate on a regular basis. Now, the thing to remember with grains is that you can't sort of dry cook them. You can't just stick them in the pan or in the oven without water cooking them first, because they need to absorb a load of water to be properly cooked. So boiling or pressure cooking are really your two options. So boiling for most whole grains is the way you're going to have to cook them. The first boiling method that I want to talk through is what I call the straining method. This is pretty straightforward. We're going to add our grains to a pan, add water, bring it up to the boil. We're not going to worry too much about the specific quantities. We're just going to add enough water so that the grains are completely submerged for the entirety of the cooking time. If the water gets too low and some of the grains rise above the water level, then we're going to just add in some more boiling water. And then at the end of the cooking time, we're just going to strain off any excess water through a sieve or colander or something like that. So for the straining method, it's important to make sure that you have enough water so that the grains are fully submerged through the entirety of the cooking time, because that's going to ensure that you get even cooking of the grains. So the ones near the top are going to be cooking just as fast as the ones near the bottom. You'll also find that having plenty of water in there helps to prevent the grains sticking to the bottom of the pan, which can be a bit of a danger. But there are a couple of things you want to do there. You want to turn the heat down so it's not too aggressive. You want just a sort of gentle boil when you're strain cooking grains. And you also want to probably give the pan a stir just every now and then, just in case they're getting stuck to the bottom, and that'll just lift them off and prevent that from happening. Our second boiling method is called the exact water boiling method, and this relies on the fact that as grains cook, they absorb water, and specific grains will absorb a specific amount of water. So if you take a known amount of a grain and then you add in the exact right amount of water that that grain is going to absorb throughout its cooking time, during that cooking time, it will absorb all that water, and then there should be no need to strain off any water at the end. So that is exact water. Now, there are a few watch outs when it comes to exact water boiling that we want to be thinking of. Firstly, the right amount of water to add in will depend on the grain you're cooking. Each grain is slightly different. So for instance, if you're cooking brown rice, you want 2 parts water to 1 part rice. So for instance, 2 cups of water to 1 cup of dry rice. But if you're cooking something like pearl barley, for instance, it's 3 to 1. So you're going to have to look up that information before you start cooking if you exact water cook. The other thing that you've got to bear in mind is that with exact water cooking, it can be a danger of the grains sticking to the bottom of the pan and burning, or just getting stuck into a nasty mess. So it's essential when you're exact water cooking that once you bring it up to the boil initially, you then turn the heat down to its lowest setting. That way, you're going to keep the water hot enough for it to cook, but you're not going to be applying dry heat directly to the bottom of that pan and burning the grains. It's also essential that pretty much as soon as all of the water has been absorbed, you want to take the pan off the heat. You don't want to be cooking the grains dry with no water in there because it will burn them. Another watch out when it comes to exact water cooking is to watch out for uneven cooking. I'm going to draw this out for you because it's a little bit easy to explain. All right, so this is our straining method. It's very simple. We've got our saucepan, and these green dots are the grains, and then the water are these obviously blue lines. So we just want to make sure that throughout the entirety of the cooking time, we have more than enough water to fully cover the grains. Now, the water level is obviously going to go down as the grains absorb water, so we might want to just top that up. We can use hot water, for example, from a kettle, just top it up, add in some more if we need to. Now, the exact water method starts in exactly the same way. We have our grains fully submerged in water. But what happens in this case is, over time, the water level is going to drop as the grains absorb that water. Now, we're obviously not adding any more. We added in the exact right amount of water. So what's going to happen is we're going to have some grains below the water line that are still submerged, and some grains above the water line that are now sort of dry, that are not submerged in water anymore. Now, if we just left it like this, what could happen is that we get uneven cooking. So the grains submerged under the water are going to be cooking faster than the ones above the water line. So it's important that we do something to try and keep the cooking rate even across all of the grains. And what that is to put a lid on our pan. Okay? That's going to create a more or less sealed environment. Now, what that's going to do is to trap in steam inside the cooking vessel. And this means that the steam will still be able to cook the grains above the water line. So we're going to get nice, even cooking. So it's really important to make sure you've got a lid on your pan once it reaches the boil, and then you turn down the heat when you're exact water cooking. So by putting that lid on, we're essentially going to have a combination of the grains at the bottom of the pan being boiled and the grains nearer the top being steamed, but they're both being cooked, which is ideal. So let's put it into action, and I will show you what it looks like to cook 1 cup of brown rice using both of the different methods. Okay, so here I have 1 cup of brown rice, which I've just rinsed a little bit under the tap in each of these pans. So in this pan, I'm going to be doing straining cooking, and in this one, I'm going to be doing exact water. Now, with exact water, even though you're going to turn the heat down really low, when you've got a lid on, it can encourage bubbling over. So we really want to try and use a nice, big, wide pan to try and prevent that from happening. So really big pan if you can. Now, it's not so much of an issue with straining, but with exact water, you want to know exactly how much grain you've started with. So I know I've measured out 1 cupful of brown rice for both of these. So now I've got some freshly boiled water from the kettle, which I'm going to use. It's already hot, so let's get going. So for the exact water, I'm going to measure out exactly 2 cups of water. Then I'm going to put the lid on and start the heat. At this point, I want a high heat just to get it back up to the boil. Now, with the straining, I'm just going to free pour. Just eyeball it so that it looks like enough water. And then I'm going to start the heat on that one too. Again, a high heat to get up to the boil quickly. So now in both of these instances, I just want to be watching carefully and seeing when they get back to the boil. Okay, so after just a minute or so, we're already getting back to the boil on our exact water pot. So as we get to a good boiling temperature, what we want to do, we can see that boil now. I can see the bubbles are really coming vigorously. So give it one good stir. Just make sure nothing's on the bottom. One good stir. The lid goes back on. And then we turn the heat down to its lowest setting. And then we don't touch that for 25 minutes. So I'm going to set a 25-minute timer. And now the straining pan has reached a vigorous boil. So I'm just going to turn that down to a sort of low to medium heat. Now, there's no need to necessarily put a lid on here. We can just keep it open. We could put a lid on if we want to, but it's going to increase the chances that it's going to boil over. So we have to watch it more closely. So I prefer to just leave it open. There's enough water in there and we'll top it up throughout the cooking time if needs be. Now, I'm going to set a 30-minute timer for this and then I'll strain it off. Now, at the end of our 25 minutes for our exact water, all we're going to do is just take it off the heat or just turn the heat off and just leave it for another 10 minutes without touching it. And this is just going to give chance for any excess water to be fully absorbed and just for a little bit of extra steam cooking to happen, because we are doing it on the lowest possible heat, so it's not a vigorous boil. But you can actually see it's bubbling still quite vigorously, and that's just because we've got this lid on, so we're really getting that bubbling coming through. Whereas in the straining pot, we've just got a very gentle simmer, which is ideal. So both of these can just wait away now. One thing that I should mention is that this looks to be fine, but if your pan isn't this big, and if you find that the bubbles are coming up to the top and starting to sputter out of the sides when you're exact water cooking, you might want to just move this pan onto a smaller ring. So if I'd seen that, I would have moved this onto a smaller ring, and that's fine. You can just leave it there, just on that lowest heat setting of the smaller ring. So when we're exact water cooking, we want to simmer with heat for generally about 3/4 of the total length of the cooking time. And then once that 3/4 of the time has elapsed, in this case that's going to be 25 minutes, we're going to want to take this off the heat and just let it steam cook with no additional heat for the remaining sort of quarter of the time. In this case that'll be about 10 minutes. For the straining batch, we're just going to be cooking it, just simmering it for around about half an hour, and that should be fine. So sure enough, I did have to move this pan to the smallest heat ring on my stovetop because it was starting to sputter just a little bit at the edges. Now, the exact water is honestly easier at this point because after this, I'm just not even going to worry about it until the timer goes off. With the straining, I'm just going to keep half an eye on it, make sure that if the water level starts to get low and I see dry grains poking out the top, I'm going to add some more water from the kettle in there. Okay, so the straining pan is starting to look a little bit dry, the water levels dropped down, so I'm just going to add some more boiling water. Again, just eyeballing it, just so there's plenty of water in there. Now don't add cold water when you do this, otherwise it'll bring the temperature down too much. You want to use already boiled water if you're adding more. Alright, so my 25-minute timer on the exact water pan has just gone off, so I'm going to turn the heat off that now. And you can see that the water level has dropped below the grains, which is as it should be. And I'll also show you, if you look closely, you can see these little holes in the grains, in the rice. Those holes are from where steam has been escaping, which is a good sign, and that's what we want to be seeing when it comes to exact water cooking. So I'm just going to leave this for a further 10 minutes just for any extra water to be absorbed and to just let that steam continue to cook the rice. So that is my 30-minute timer on the straining pan done. So I'm just going to turn the heat off and then strain this through a sieve. And there we have it, our two perfectly cooked brown rices. Perfectly tender, lovely. And then when you've exact water cooked, you might want to just fluff it a little bit with a fork like this. And you can see that there's no water left in the bottom. So that's the beauty of the exact water. You don't have to strain anything off. It's all been absorbed. So there we go. The two different boiling methods demonstrated for you. So there we have it. Those are the two boiling methods that that you can use for all of your whole grains. So which one is better? Which one should you use? Well, it's really up to you. You can use whichever one you like. I would say if you're not familiar with the grain and you're not used to cooking it, then probably the straining method is going to be a little bit easier. It's a little bit less fiddly, there's less things to know about. So you can just keep topping up the water, strain it off at the end, it's all good. But I would tend to suggest that once you become familiar with it, the exact water method is going to be faster generally, because you're going to put it on that lowest heat. You don't need to watch it. You can just leave it for that cooking time. You can just go off into your kitchen, do whatever else you need to do, other cooking, and you don't really need to worry about it. Whereas with straining, yeah, you're probably going to have to stir it a little bit more. You're going to have to watch that it's not boiling over, that kind of thing. The other thing that you might want to be considering is if you're adding in other ingredients into the cooking water, so perhaps you're adding in some herbs or spices, you want that flavor to infuse into the grains as they cook. That can be a really nice technique, but if you're straining off the water at the end, you might lose quite a lot of that flavor. Whereas if you're exact water cooking it, it's all going to be locked into the grains and you're not going to lose anything. So I really hope you found this useful and you can apply one of these boiling methods next time you come to cook whole grains. Now, when you're cooking, you want to make it fast and efficient. You don't want to be spending hours and hours in the kitchen preparing your vegan meals. So to help you with that, as a free gift for you, I have my guide on how to make delicious and healthy vegan meals fast. So it's going to give you my top 5 time-saving hacks to give you hours of kitchen time back. So my free gift to you, please click the link in the description below and it is all yours. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video.